All right.
All right, fantastic. Well, first of all, Jan and Laura, thank you so much for being part of this project.
You're welcome.
And coming down to the Cobble Bunker here today. So we have a few questions. So I'll start with the first question, and it's probably more directed towards you, Jan, really. But what was the reason that brought you to develop the Slocan Valley? And are you able to describe the push and pull factors that sort of brought you here?
Okay. Well, it really boils down to the children and education. In Vancouver, I was working with a small school called the Bob Barker School, which was a free school. And he had worked at Summerhill in England. So I saw an article in the newspaper, went to this meeting, met him, and was a transformational moment for me, hearing him speak. So then I worked with him for a couple of years, and then had my own little group of kids in the city, and then with the parents of one of the parents of that school, Margot, and then we were working with or being paid by the Company of Young Canadians, which was something that Pierre Trudeau had developed, and I think we got $50 a month.
Woo!
Well, it went much further then than today, and we were in contact with the high school, which was called No Place, and that's where I met Monica's family and the father of my next child after I'd had Laura and Mark. So it was through that association with the Company of Young Canadians, learning all about social justice, some of us decided to leave Vancouver and find some land. So one of the other parents, friend, Margot, we went off driving around BC with some of our kids, and we ended up in one of the sort of another transformational time was meeting the Doukhobor community in Robson, and they were pacifist vegetarians and had homeschooling ideas. So we sort of thought, we've found our home, and that was what really instilled us here. And then a couple of the fellows came up and found the land in Valakan, and that's where we moved to. 3 couples, were we? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
6 adults.
6 adults and 6
5
kids.
or 6
5
kids.
or 6 kids.
In a 1-room cabin.
With a loft.
And no electricity.
No electricity, no water. No. There was a much larger, it was basically a 1-room cabin with a large extension on it with a good roof, and that was turned into a large living room.
Well, that came later, right?
Well, Blake and Rob worked on that.
You know, when I went to go look at that, like 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't been there for years.
Right.
And when I went back there, I remember in my mind thinking it was huge, that addition.
Right.
It's like this big. It's tiny.
Oh, I remember it as being large too. Anyway, so we last one winter, all of us in this, and as soon as spring came, people got their tents out and
Down by the river.
yeah. And at that point we had 2 babies. My son, Sonny, was 9 months when we moved in there, and there was Tree had been born
October
in
that
the
year.
October that year, right? So she was an infant. So we had 2 sets of diapers that we would put them outside in the winter to freeze, and then we would go and scrape them off in the outhouse and then take them down to the river, do what we could in the river, and then finish them at home. Of course, we were hauling water at that point and had kerosene lamps. So really, the origin was the children, basically socialist ideas, what you could fundamentally call it. You know, why does everybody have to have a tractor? Can't we share it? And why does everybody have to have whatever? Why can't we share it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did those ideas come from? I mean,
I beg your pardon?
where did those ideas come from?
Well, I was brought up in a basically socialist family. And then the ideas came from reading education literature, Paul Goodman, Ivan Illich, Summerhill, reading those books, and yeah. And the basic ideas of that, if children aren't so regimented, they learn so much by observation, by seeing, hearing, smelling.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to try and find out more about the Flying Hearts Commune here.
Sorry, the which?
The Flying Hearts Commune, is that?
The
Flying Hearts family.
Well,
The Flying Hearts family, yes, which gave birth to the band Brain Damage.
yeah.
I was their mother, basically.
And the drummer, the first drummer.
Well, yes. Of course, what happened was our first. We disintegrated as a communal effort. There, I mean, we hardly lasted a minute, really, compared to some. I can point to. You know, one of my basic experiences in most communal situations is that at that stage, at that time, the gender balance was still not like it is today, put it that way. And a lot of the men often had trouble getting along, was my experience. I found the women got along together much easier than the men, except in the Brain Damage band. Yeah. So I left Vatican and went to Vancouver, and there, through David Orcutt, I met David Engelman and Bing Jensen and Helen. And we decided to go to Mexico. I bought a bus. David fixed it all up, and off we went. And on the way, we stopped in LA at some friends, and they had a studio downstairs. And so, I had introduced Bing to Gary Kramer because Bing wanted he needed a rhythm guitar player. He was the lead guitar player. So Gary Kramer was with us, and so he played guitar, Bing played guitar, and David played bass, and they said, well, all we need now is a drummer and a singer. So I said to Helen, well, I'll play drums if you'll sing. So that's what we did. And because I had had ballet training through in my youth, I knew where the one was, which is important if you're a drummer. And they were pretty excited that I knew where the one was. I remember that. Oh my God, she knows where the one is.
She knows where the downbeat is.
Yeah. So, and that turned out to be a beautiful trip and a difficult trip. We were crammed into this bus, and money was limited. We were not particularly, well, I was the only one with kids, which often my kids were always a little bit older than a lot of the folks. And yeah, so the trip had some difficult moments. We got back and we went up the hill, where Julie and Helen had come to, and where they had built that beautiful, great big log house, which took years to finish. So we were up there for a summer. We played maybe 3 gigs in the valley at that point, and then off I went again to Vancouver. And do I have to reveal all my relationships? Anyway, I went to Vancouver with someone from the band, and we played. The rest of the folks followed. We played a couple of gigs in Vancouver, and I just could not hang in. I had my kids, "Mommy, let's go home." Yeah, so I left the band at that point. Yeah, that's the story. My story around the brain damage, the Flying Hearts family brain damage, and it grew. That band grew, and they played for years, and they had this enormous following of groupies around them. Yeah, but I had moved away from that. It didn't suit life with kids, really.
Did you write any songs?
Did I write songs? No, I was playing the drums with them. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
A trap set, you know.
A kit.
A kit.
Bass
Right.
drum, snare, toms.
Yeah. Gary, the rhythm guitar player, basically told me, you do the 1 here and you do the 2 here, and then he kept encouraging me. He says, you can do this, and okay, now you can add in that. And I used to watch his leg when we were playing, so to keep me on.
Must have been exciting though on the road. Is there a highlight you can remember from your time performing with the band there?
Yes, we were on a little stage in the valley. At the time, it was Tel Schreiber's property.
That was his birthday.
Yes, that's right. It was Tel's birthday. That's right. And the band is playing. We're playing, and my understanding from an artistic point of view is what happens is the muse enters, and you can feel it, and this is what Laura knows well, and what musicians and all artists go for, is this moment when you're not doing it, it's coming through you. And that's what happened. It was the one and only time that happened for me. And as the song came to an end, Gary's going, "Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going." But of course, as soon as he said that,
Yeah, your mind came back in.
Our brains came back in to play. Yeah, so that was for me, a very highlighted moment. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So going back to the communal setting here, what skills did you sort of bring to the commune, and what skills did you learn when you were there?
What skills did I bring? Well, I was pretty much, how does it say, going barefoot and pregnant. Pretty much at home, cooking, lots, Monica told me not many, well, what, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I was eating with her and Blake. How long has Blake been dead? 6 years? 7 years?
More than that.
More than that? I know time flies. Time really is going fast now. I can't. Anyway, Monica said, you know, you taught us all how to cook like this. Well, you know, we had to bring in all dried food. We would come to Nelson and there was very little, and we couldn't make trips to Nelson. There was a store where the co-op is now. What was that store called then? Anyway, so we brought in everything through Fed Up. Is it Fed Up? That food co-op?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we brought it all in. We'd go down there, load up with rice and beans and oil and the necessities as we saw it. Yeah.
But you were also producing vegetables.
Not at that point we weren't.
Because it was in the winter, right? Or I guess we got there in the fall, but
Well, we had a summer, here I'm blowing my nose.
it's all right.
You'll edit that, I'm sure. We did not grow, we had an orchard. We ate a lot of apples. It was a huge old orchard and we ate a lot of apples. And we were not in that first place long enough. At some point in my, as Laura was saying, oh my God, so much happened in such a short time. And that was my impulsive gypsy nature. We moved to Lillooet. And that was really my first experience with growing all the food, all the vegetables we needed.
But we grew gardens before that, though. Like, I mean, maybe it wasn't to the capacity of in Lillooet, but...
No, I mean, when we lived in Vancouver, I had a small garden. And in Vatican, I never grew an actual vegetable garden. I had a herb garden that I was all, you know, shaping it in like a mandala with all.
That's Mom, always bringing in the spiritual.
Yes, so by the time I was in Lillooet, Laura was already, had flown the coop, had been in.
Almost. I was there for a bit, and then I didn't.
You would come back. You would come and be there. Yes, we have.
But that first winter in the teepee, I was there.
Oh yes, yeah.
That you made. She made a teepee on a treadle sewing machine that we lived in for one winter.
Tell me about that. How did you manage that?
Pardon?
How did you manage that?
Well, I don't know. That's what Sonny was saying the other day at my birthday. He said, I don't know how Mom managed. No running water, you know, no electricity. You just, I used to make candles. We had kerosene lamps. We hauled water. When we had that teepee, we built a really nice outdoor kitchen. I mean, it was all rough lumber and whatnot, but it had shelves and counter space and buckets of water underneath. And, yeah.
Then I took off.
It was like, then what?
Then I took off.
Then you took off, yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah. She went to Argenta and then joined that band. What was it?
No, that was way later. I went to Vancouver and went and lived with Grandma.
Oh, of course, you went to Vancouver.
I went to school and I lived with the Salters.
Right, I know. It's a good, she keeps my timeline straight.
So Laura, I'd like to ask about sort of growing up in this environment.
Well, it's interesting, like listening to Mom, because it's funny how when, you know, here I am now at my age and looking back and remembering when I was a kid and you know, so that when we came to Vatican, that was a very important time for me. And, you know, and it felt like sort of like, well, that was the first commune, let's say.
Yes.
But then the way it actually kind of felt for me is that it just kind of extended into all the pieces. I mean, it was like, you know, so like the trip to Mexico, we always came back. So it felt like it was sort of like these little extensions out of what was happening, and then we'd come back to the feeling of community. And the community just felt like it kept growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger. You know, I was, you know, like the brain damage thing. I mean, I can remember, this must have been when you decided you were like not the drummer anymore. Except I think I remember doing this maybe after you were also the drummer, not the drummer anymore, I mean, where Mark and I'd be on stage and they were like going, hitchhike, hitchhike, baby. Me and Mark are like, hitchhike, we're on stage, hitchhike, baby. You know, and then we just go pass out and fall asleep in the back of the stage and stuff.
Oh,
when did that all happen?
Oh, at the mud flats? Was that at the mud flats?
It was more like there was all these halls. I remember like the hall in Castlegar, or the Jam Factory here, or
that was after
you.
After I.
But I think there were some, I don't know, maybe it was in Vancouver when, I mean, maybe it was Sunny going, Mommy, and Mark and I were like, this is cool.
Yeah, because I had a 2.5-year-old at that point, and and you were 7 years older than Sunny?
7, I think.
Yes.
Well, when we first moved to Vatican, I was 8.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, I think one of the big things that, you know, because I've been reflecting on this a lot because I've been working on my poetry project that sort of outlines a lot of this stuff, was the overwhelming trust in each other to look after the kids.
Yeah.
You know, like I talked to Boris and he was remembering a time when Mom, this is back in Vancouver before, you know, when she was kind of like, you know, into this whole different a way of learning for the kids, she wanted something different for her kids. So you started that school for the little kids.
Yeah.
And Boris was one of the people that sort of was involved in that. Anyway, I guess they decided that we were going to have some kind of summer camp over on Long Beach.
Oh, yeah.
And there wasn't enough room in the 2 buses for all the kids to get into them. So I was 8, except for Boris thought I was 12, but I had to remind him I was 8. And Boris and I, he was 19 and I'm 8, and we just go hitchhike to the Long Beach.
Right.
The 2 of us.
That's right.
to join everybody at Long Beach.
Well, it was a different time. I mean, when we were in Vancouver, Laura and Mark, her younger brother, at 8 years old, they would go off and get on the bus and go somewhere.
Yeah, we'd go downtown and wander
kids
around.
Don't do that now, and that's how one of the ways they learned reading.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. Kids don't do that now. They can't do that. It's so weird.
Well, I guess it's dangerous.
It's dangerous now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't then. Vancouver was a much softer city.
But the other question that you asked Mom a minute ago was about like, what did we learn? And I remember us learning. I mean, it must have been from sort of some support from the Doukhobors.
Yeah.
But we really. I mean, maybe you knew how to make yogurt before, but it just became this kind of more, because we were all doing it together. I just remember us all, taking turns and shaking the butter in the jar, and we'd pass it around in the circle, and making butter and
and
grinding grain to make bread, and
right.
Memories of that, and then the orchard, and the apple thing. I mean, and this is so interesting for me too, sitting here hearing all this stuff, because I've been writing about it a lot, right? And the apples and all that beautiful apples, and they were so yummy, and going down to the river. And I remember Mom, with, back to the mandala spiritual thing, and she would get Mark and I up, my brother, in the morning, and we'd go down to the river and throw the I Ching and jump in the river.
Yeah.
And I remember the diaper washing too.
Right.
And learning how to milk a cow was a really big thing for me, a really strong memory. And I remember learning like how to do it and really know what you were doing, and the relationship with the cow and my head, and letting the cow know that I knew what I was doing and I was confident in the milking, things like that. I feel like those are the skills that we learned how to do, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of that, you know, going back to the yogurt, a lot of that food thing came out of reading.
Oh, is it Diet for a Small Planet?
That came after. The first book was Back to Eden. Back to Eden. Everybody was into Back to Eden, and Golden Seal.
Oh, and garlic.
And garlic.
I'm pretty much allergic to garlic now because I think I ate so much of it when I was a kid. Every time there was anything wrong, here, have some garlic. I'm like, okay, Mom. Cod liver oil and garlic. Yummy.
Oh, fantastic. But so many practical life skills that you were picking
Yes,
up.
practical life skills.
Yeah.
Once Marcia Brondy interviewed me to help me make a resume, and I said, oh, I wasn't doing anything at that point. I was, you know, with the kids on the land. And she said, don't say that. You knew how to run a generator. You knew how to grow food. You knew how to look after your kids. You knew how to, you know, she just went through all the skills that I did, you know, chainsaw, goats. Yeah, so a lot of practical life skills. And Laura exemplifies that in so many ways. Because, I mean, not only is she, you know, a beautiful singer and a teacher, and she keeps on going to school, keeps on learning, but she also can mend a pipe, fix a shelf, fix the car, grow her garden, all those, yeah, she exemplifies that experience.
Yeah. I have a line in one of my poems called, I went to the school of capable.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. And so at the communes and in the sort of counterculture, we have a lot of cultural music going on here, but we also have different aspects. We have sharing partners, we have drugs, we have things like that.
I'm sorry, I missed the word you said before drugs.
So sharing partners.
Oh, yes.
And sex, drugs, and rock and roll, if you will,
Yes.
aspects. Could you tell us a little bit about what was going on there?
I can. I was never involved in any kind of shared partner communal thing.
You mean open relationship?
Or open relationships, yes. It was serial monogamy. There are 3 fathers for my 4 children. And we, of course, were not only smoking marijuana, but we were growing it. And I am, in fact, a felon. The laws have changed now, but yeah. So, and then we moved into, you know, there was LSD, and which of course people like Margot and Blake, who came from Toronto, they had already done LSD. I mean, I did LSD maybe 3 times. And then with the band we discovered MDA, or is that what it's called? MDA, yeah, MDA. Laura remembers that vividly. I mean, we had a lot of fun, but that was a 1-2 time episode, and then I left the band, and so I was not so involved in that part of the culture at that time. later in my life, well, 4 or 5 years later, maybe a little longer, coke came on the scene, and you know, things really started going downhill at that point, or not long after. Yeah. So I mean, personally, I was, you know, I used cocaine off and on for about 4 years, and then took a little acid, walked up the mountain, and never touched it again.
Back to the acid.
Yes, back to the acid. Yeah. So, which of course now they're using psilocybin, and oh yes, of course there was psilocybin in there.
And there was peyote too.
Oh, and there's peyote too. Yes, peyote is a wonderful medicine, wonderful medicine. And I learned about peyote from a Navajo woman, who you know told me how it was used as a medicine. It was the mother of all was the peyote. And I was what I call a bush midwife at that point, because there were no midwives. And one friend called me and said, I want you to come and be with me, and I'm having this baby at home. And I'm like, oh my God, Kate, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. She said, well, if you don't come and be with me, I'm just going to do it by myself. So I did. And then someone else asked me, and then I got the taxi driver book. Taxi drivers have a book on what to do for if a baby's born in the back. So, yeah, so, and then, you know, several people would come up to me and say, I hear you're a midwife. I say, no, I don't call myself that. I will come and help if you feel like you want another woman there to help. And then Patsy Bears had more training in Vancouver, and she came to Lillooet, and she brought me one of the old-fashioned wooden things where you can hear the baby's heart, and blood pressure cuff, and some homeopathic remedies.
Were you the midwife when Will was born?
Yes. Oh no, I wasn't. Not for Will. There was one of Monica's sisters was married to a doctor.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
That's when Will was born. There was about 15 of us up in the balcony area of the house, looking down at the birth.
That was the first birth I ever saw.
Right.
Yeah.
And then at one point, my youngest daughter, Rose, was holding a flashlight for me for the birth. Yes, anyway. Lucky for me and the families involved, all the births were normal. And as soon as it started to become formalized, I withdrew. So I don't know, how did we get on to midwifery? Oh, from drugs. You asked the question about drugs, right? And I was talking about peyote. Well, that was one of the babies I delivered. Right. And she took peyote for the birth, which I had no knowledge of that, but she was bringing her knowledge. And she was married or in partnership with a Canadian man who came and joined us in Lillooet. And they were living in their teepee at the time, and she took the peyote before the birth, and then I was quite anxious. At some point I thought, after the baby was born, she was bleeding, and I felt like we needed to go to the hospital. And she said, no, I just need to take more peyote. She took peyote and went down to the river by herself, and I don't know how much peyote she did. They used to pack a jar with it and fill it with water, and it was very, very strong. And there was a piece of placenta left in, and taking the peyote, she got rid of it. It passed, and she was fine. An amazing experience, learning experience for me, but not anything I would ever recommend on my own for anyone. Here, take a bunch of peyote and you'll be fine.
She did it herself.
Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting dynamic, the sort of growth of midwifery.
I'm sorry, I
The
can't.
growth of midwifery is an interesting little dynamic, I think, that's come out of the counterculture movement. I think that's quite an interesting little legacy there.
Yes.
And I mean, I have 3 children. One of mine was born at home, and I was very happy that was the case.
Yes.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was a lot of self-learning, and scorned by many. But really, we were, I don't know, leading the way, but we were cracking the mold in some ways, in many ways, with food, with life, with death.
Pioneers.
Yeah, we were. Yes, so much of it was like pioneers. You know, no water, no electricity, chopping wood. We we very often didn't know what we were doing, but
It's so funny because I've been thinking about this and I'm like, what were the adults up to anyways?
yeah, yes.
What are they doing?
And I remember Laura at one point saying, there was this was when you're in your early teens, or about 13 or something, and you said, I don't want to be at school where we sit around and talk about our feelings. I want to learn things. And that's when you went to.
Yeah, I said I wanted to learn I wanted academics.
She wanted academics, and so that's when.
That's when the shift happened for me.
I listened to her, and she went to city school.
Thanks, Mom.
And for you, Laura, so we talked about this before, that growing up on you were seeing things which maybe you were perhaps regret seeing? I don't know.
Well, it's not regret. It was more like it felt on the edge, and maybe confusing at times. You know, it's interesting. You know, we're talking about the. I think you said shared partners, but you said, what did you say? Serial monogamy. Yeah. There was a lot of sex going on around. There was a lot of sex noises going on around that I was like trying to make sense of. And I don't necessarily mean from my mom. I mean, you know, when we were on the bus, you know, it was like, it was happening all around, and it just seemed like it was accepted. Or I would go to my friend's house and, you know, it's like, oh, it's happening over there. Okay. You know, and then just, it was interesting kind of growing into a woman, kind of trying to understand what that is for me, you know, and kind of like, because of sort of what I grew up around, it took me a little while to find my own way, I think. In terms of, well, how do you have sex anyway? Like, how do I have sex? But, and, you know, the drug thing, like, I mean, when I look back as an adult, you know, and I have 6 kids, 6 daughters, you know, I look back and I go, oh my God. You know, I mean, I was 10 when I first took acid in Cottonwood, Arizona. We were on our way back from Mexico.
Yeah.
But, you know, and in one way it's like, oh my God, that's like horrifying, right? But maybe some would say, and maybe part of myself in this moment might even say that, but to be perfectly honest, you know, I spent the next few years after that first acid trip wishing every acid trip was like the first one.
Yeah,
and it never was. So I just quit. So, like, you know, it was amazing. I mean, I remember seeing, because we were in Arizona and all the mountains were really craggy, and I saw John, Paul, George, and Ringo instead of the president. Stoned out of my mind. And the mountains were moving to, you know, trucking like a doo-dog man.
Oh, right.
Trucking like a doo-dog man.
Right,
I'm like, oh my God. So.
And the river.
And the river. And then seeing Gary's face, and he said he saw God, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. What is God? You know, anyway, it was quite something for me. And I think I was perfectly safe, and they always had somebody that didn't take the acid. Like if a whole group of people took acid, one person did not take acid. They were in charge of making the soup and making sure nobody did anything that they could hurt themselves with, right? So I thought that was good. And I think that, you know, it's like that edge, you know, about, you know, where's the line of something? Like, where's the line of being open about sex? Where's the line about opening your mind with psychedelics? And I think that we're continually trying to figure out what the line is and where the line is all the time. And yeah, maybe there was times when I saw it maybe too much, or it was, I didn't have maybe, I could have maybe used some more boundaries around, like maybe I had to make some decisions that I maybe shouldn't have had to make. But then again, as Mom was saying, I don't know whether I'd be able to do the things I can do now if I hadn't had to do that. So it's all a learning, right? But yeah, the partner sharing and the sex and the music and the rock and roll, and it was definitely an interesting time of discovery, I think. And I think the adults were looking for some kind of sense of freedom and an open mind and love, just love. Everybody just wants love, right?
Yes. And that's what my son Mark, who's Laura's next brother, has said, that throughout all of that, there was, you know, never any doubt from Mom that you know, from my point of view, it was my love for my children that was constant and I hope grounding. And I must say that so many young people now have so much anxiety. Young people then certainly didn't have the kind of anxiety that young people have now. So I mean, who's to say what or why? But except the world seems to be in a bloody mess.
Yeah, one of the other things, you know, that I've been thinking about is that, you know, like Mom said, like I never ever did not feel in doubt of being loved in my, you know, by my mom especially, but also, you know, the people that were around us. It was like there was just so much care there, and also a kind of support to just be me. Like I felt really seen, like that, hey, I'm me, and it's okay, it's kind of cool, and I felt like everybody felt seen for the most part.
Yeah.
Or at least I felt as kids did. I don't know how all you adults felt, but you know, yeah. And I think that's a really important thing about community.
Yeah.
And story is that feeling of being seen and sharing, and how precious that is to have community and to have the love and to feel like you're seen. And yeah, I appreciate the experience.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to move on. So we talked a little bit about this, but how important was spiritualism in the counterculture there in the Kootenays, do you think?
I would. What do you mean by spiritualism?
This could be religious or to God, or it could be looking at alternative practices,
Right.
certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I can only speak personally about that, and I think that the different groups had different leanings in that area. It's my assumption now. I feel that, there was a very strong influence of pacifism, which came from the Doukhobors and from the draft dodgers. And the Slocan Valley had a lot of draft dodgers, and many who are still there. And a lot of those people came from academic backgrounds. And so I was not brought up in a formal religion. In my later years, my young adult years, my parents were studying yoga, and as I said, I've not had any formal. Well, my mother was brought up as a strict Presbyterian. Her parents were missionaries in China, and she was brought up. Those people are carved in stone. She really leaps and bounds in her life to where she was. So in our experiences, Laura made reference to the I Ching, and that is what we were using as a guide at that point. I wanted us to recognize and the children to recognize, and the I Ching was, I don't know how I was first introduced, probably Margot.
And it felt like it was sort of related to nature too.
Yes, it was so related to nature, and that, of course, is through all my different experiences and searchings and learnings. Fundamentally, the most important aspect of my experience has been with nature and environmentalism, and for a good 30 years, I was in and out, depending on kids and my health, in the watershed movement in the Slocan Valley. We never saved one watershed. We tried. We never saved one watershed that we were trying to save. So a lot of frustration with the environmental stuff, but because I gardened really extensively, large gardens, I from there became much more influenced by the nature, generally speaking. And so, what's the question? What am I answering?
About spirituality.
Oh, yes, about spirituality. Yes, so that really, to me, now the most spiritual thing that any of us can be doing is to save the planet, is to work on climate change and the environmental movement. It affects us in so many ways, whether we're working, with water, with trees, with learning about soil, the rivers, all of it. There's just so much to learn and so much to honor there, and that's so. That's really just a very my personal take on spiritualism. I certainly, read Buddhism, joined a Buddhist group for a while, left that. I did look at other things, but really have landed on nature as the teacher.
Remember when you got into the whirling dervish thing?
Oh yeah, well, yes. The Sufism.
Yeah.
Sufism, which, it's still, I mean, it was Sufism that gave birth to Rumi and Kabir, those Eastern poets, right? And that is the experience of being one with everyone else and the universe. And so that's was certainly a meaningful, that was just another place where I learned about, the concept of being one.
Well, I had that memory about going down to the river and the I Ching, and I mean, I felt like, because, back to why we first went to the valley and what Mom was trying to find for us kids in terms of schooling. I think it also was about. I feel like you're very spiritual,
Right.
like, in so many things that when we were little, it felt like that was always there about, like, and how you'd bring stories, and I remember we were just talking about Jumping Mouse, the story of Jumping Mouse.
Oh yeah.
And indigenous stories.
Right.
You brought that in too. There was that book, The Seven Arrows, that was there, and the other thing that I've been thinking about was that back then when we were there, we had no idea whose land we were on. Whose land it really was we were on.
Right.
And that's been a whole journey. And
yeah.
I felt like it was like there was this kind of reverence for the day-to-day, the extraordinary in the ordinary. And it felt spiritual. It felt like church. It felt like music was actually very spiritual too, and free. Like when I was a kid, I never had I felt like I was musical. And no one ever told me that, I had to do it this way or that way or whatever. I would pick up any instrument and just make music out of it. And it wasn't until later when I felt like I'd sort of gained some sort of more restrictive ideas around how you play each instrument that I got scared or I got judgmental about myself, let's say, about it. But when I was a kid, I felt like, we would sit around, I felt like we'd sit around and jam, and we would be singing and playing drums, and it felt so spiritual to me.
Yeah.
Like that was so,
I know.
that was
the around the kitchen table music.
and
a lot of that.
The other amazing thing that I just thought would be is like my mom could make magic out of nothing. Like literally, we had nothing. So what did she make it out of? Nature.
Yeah.
You looked around and we didn't have hardly any money, and you would just create a magical Christmas scene out of nothing. How did you do that? You just did it.
Yeah,
Baking and making
baking and making. Yeah.
And it was so magic, and so that was quite incredible. So that was sort of, I think, the spiritual thing for me. And like she said about the mandala, there was just always like, oh, we're doing this, and oh, let's think about this part of it now for a sec. Kind of had that vibe to it.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to ask about what sort of connections you have with people, outside of your family there, and that could be talking about, you talked a bit about the dukkha balls and the connections there, but also other members, sort of back to the land settlers, for instance, other communes. What sort of relationship did you have with those people? Can you remember?
You mean like other people in the valley, kind
in the
of?
valley as well, yeah.
Oh, well, I learned there was a Doukhobor family right beside us, or an older couple, and that's where I learned about growing tomatoes. I have a lot of respect for the Doukhobor people, and everyone else around us. Just, I remember the cow got loose and went into Bob Inwood's garden, and the cow ate all Bob Inwood's tomatoes.
Oh no.
Bob was so understanding. I mean, that's how really we met him, and it was through Bob that Mark learned to play The Girl from Ipanema on the guitar, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And Laura's brother Mark, who has not nurtured his musical ability, has the same ear and potential there, but he used to, when he was a child, he played the guitar a lot, and he could go to a concert or hear musicians and come home and pick it out and play it, as a little guy. But he learned that from Bob Inwood. We had only good, awesome experiences with everybody that we met. We were slightly challenged by Mrs. Jones.
Oh, Mrs. Jones.
Mrs. Jones was a descendant of the older English folks that came in, and the store in Winlaw at the time was a counter, and the things were on a shelf behind. And so you had to ask Mrs. Jones for what you wanted, right?
I forgot about her.
She was not sure about us. She wasn't sure about us.
Yeah, I don't
Whereas when I met the Doukhobor woman, for some reason Margot and I drove down into Robson, and it was one of those great big Doukhobor houses, and we went in there, and here's this big Doukhobor woman with her stove outside, and she's canning peaches, and we're like, wow. And she looks at us and says, open arms, here we are with our long skirts and our bare feet, and we've got all these kids with us, and she takes us on a tour of the big house, told us how they had lived in little cabins and the big communal house, and that was just the moment, was meeting this woman, and she talked about why they didn't send their kids to school in Russia was because it was arbitrary military training. They moved from Georgia, as you probably know, and and they were vegetarians, of which at the time we were mostly trying to be vegetarians, and but Mrs. Jones is the only person that kind of looked askance at us, so we would go in and get out as fast as we could.
We've heard stories about FBI undercover agents looking for links between the communes and the Sons of Freedom, who were obviously, there were arson attacks and that sort of things, and government were watching, and the sort of thing was going on. Did you see any of that, or experience any of that?
No. And I understand their anger. I'm like mind blown at their methods. But no, we didn't see any of that. Throughout the years of being out there, the Doukhobor people have become more and more assimilated, in other words, into the North American or market culture, which is how I can pretty much describe our large culture. It's a market consumer culture. Seems to be what we're a part of. Although, the environmental movement, etc., is balancing that, and people are starting to work on having smaller and smaller footprints. But no, I didn't encounter any of that. Sons of Freedom.
And
Maybe in their choirs. I have seen their choirs at Brilliant, where I don't imagine there's any Sons of Freedom in that group, but those people are staunchly Doukhobor, and they practice, pacifism, and their choirs are amazing.
yes, quite a history there. That's for sure, definitely. And I mean, there are stories in some publications, and I've spoken to some people about, tires being slashed and stuff, and some of the Anglos, I think they were called, or some people call them, who were not so welcoming to some members of the counterculture there.
Anglos, you said.
Oh, yes.
You did?
Personally, I never experienced any
That's
of
good.
that. No.
Great, awesome. Can you tell me your involvement with the Vatican Hall Community Centre? Was that something you were very much involved with?
I'm sorry.
The Vatican Hall?
Hall.
Oh, the Vatican Hall.
Yeah.
What was our involvement with that?
Well, my partner at the time, who was the father of my third child, Sonny, he got the grant. He had been very active in the Company of Young Canadians, and he knew how to write up a grant. And so he got the grant to dig the hole. And that,
The hole.
And that is why
H-O-L-E.
that's why it's called the hole now, although with the W in front. It was a hole in the ground for a long time.
Who had the idea to put the W in front? I'd love to know that.
Pardon?
Who had the idea to put the, to call it the Vatican Hall with the W in front? Is any? Do you know?
I would say that Marcia and Corky Evans would have a better take on how that happened.
It was probably when they started thinking about a school or like a community, because we always used to refer to it as the whole.
The whole. But its intention was a community center.
Right, that's right, of course.
That was the intention.
But I mean, when it started forming, it was probably kind of like, once the building got happening and all that, it was probably like, well, what are we going to call this place? And everyone was like, why don't we just call it the Hole with
Yes.
a W or something?
Yeah, somebody said that, and I think
Who knows?
I think Marcia might know. Or Marcia, Rita Moyer, or Corky would
Right.
probably know
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Have you talked to Corky?
Yes.
Right.
And Rita as well, yeah.
Pardon?
And Rita as well, yes. So we're doing the rounds of people. It's good.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so you said you were you got a grant for the community centre,
Yes.
and how did it develop from there? Do you remember?
Again, well, I left not long, the fall after that started, and then so again, Marcia was a real mover and shaker in that. I mean, she was a carpenter herself, and the community just volunteered, and it took years, and it's fine. It is a really beautiful building. So I can't really add much more to the building of it, because I went off on my little gypsy thing, and then
Didn't come back till later.
with the music, and then went to Lillooet. Well, I had been back and forth. Of course, Rose was born in New Denver. I lived in the valley again, but went to Lillooet for about 7 years, and then back to the valley. So, yeah.
In the early phase.
Pardon?
You were there in the early phase.
I was there, yeah, in the
But
vision, the vision.
But then, for years after that, so many celebrations in that space.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Brain damage and
yeah. Yes, lots of things.
yeah.
The schools, Rose
The
went
school.
Rose went to school there,
Yeah.
my youngest.
Right. Okay. Yes, I'd love to find out more about the schools. Also, the Goat Mountain School as well is certainly of interest, I think.
Yeah.
You say your daughter went there?
My daughter Rose went there. Yeah. Yeah. She was. Was she 9? That's when I went to. That's when I was going to massage school. I went to massage school in California for part of that time. 74. So that would be around 81 or 82. She's 40. She's 49 now. Oh my God.
I know. She's turning 50 in
She's
September.
She's going to turn 50 in September. Yeah. I mean, again, she was there. She went from there. I'm sorry, my memory is. I'd have to talk to her about that.
You know, that picture that got shared recently on the Facebook page thing, the group from Slocan Valley or whatever.
The one that you're in?
Yeah, and I'm in it, and Sophie's in it, and Yael's in it, and Aaron's in it, and Max and Will, can't remember the other kids, and we were doing a play.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was connected somehow to the whole in its very early.
Yeah, possibly.
Earliness.
Corky or Michael. He's the father of Steve. Mark's.
Oh, Pratt.
Michael Pratt. I think some of it may have been there. Some of it at Corky's place.
Right.
At that point, the whole school was taking place in different locations. The building wasn't wasn't up enough yet. But when Rose was there, she was actually in the building with Seamus and Romeo.
Right.
Cadres, Mira. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. All right. I got some other questions here. So, what was your favourite thing about those times? You know, you look back fondly, and is there anything you miss about living on communes and that sort of experience?
Sorry, what's the question?
So, I'm asking about your time in the counterculture and living on communes. What do you look back most fondly about those times in the 70s there in that period?
Oh, the friendships, the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the people. Strong bonds, such strong bonds, even with people that you like. There were bunches, and then it became like tree planting bunches, and but everybody, always great affection between all, at least in my experience in my life, great affection for people that you didn't even spend a lot of time with, but who you recognize and you see, you acknowledge, and great support always. That's my feeling really is the people and the support and the learning from them all. Everybody's different experiences, and the people.
Yeah, and so you still have a great affinity, I take, with these people from those times.
Oh yeah.
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 What about you, Laura?
Oh wow. I mean, I think the same, but I was a child. So much laughter. There's so much laughter. I mean, I remember, I was thinking about that question you asked Mom about the other people in the area, and I remember, us kids would be just like wandering down the back road, and like Bob Inwood. We always knew that there was somewhere we could go if we needed someone. That was what was really cool. It was like, just that there were so many places where so many families that felt part of the whole group, that
Yeah.
we felt safe, or if we needed anything, or they were there. I remember Bob Inwood being especially that way, though. But what do I miss? Or what was it? What do I miss, or what was special?
Well, yeah, I think I asked both. Is there anything you sort of miss? Yes.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, more all the gatherings, maybe. There were so many gatherings, the celebrating. I think
Yeah.
there was a lot of celebration all the time.
Yeah.
And not that I don't have that in my life, but it had a more community celebratory vibe, as opposed to, I mean, I have a really big family, so we almost are like a community, but it's still my nuclear family, right? So, but this felt more rich in that way, because you were celebrating and being together with people that were that you might like figure out something new, like you were saying, like learning, like it just felt like your eyes would be open to a new perspective, like a slightly different perspective, and it used to happen quite a bit. There was a lot of celebrating.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe. Is there any one real example you can remember? I thought that was a fantastic event, celebration event there.
Oh, wow. I have the same, you know what? I remember a lot of celebrations at Tel's.
Yeah.
Because he had that perfect, in a big house and a big flat field and a big garden, and then he had that pond thing in the back.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that was where a lot of fun happened. Lots of fun for us kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And how do you think living on a commune, being part of the counterculture movement, has affected your life today?
Not the way I imagined it. I live alone. How has it affected my life today? Well, just the great friendships, the people that I'm so fond of, and my appreciation of all the people that are doing, all of the farmers out there in the valley now that are growing food, and I really appreciate that, and I'm happy that it has evolved, because there are aspects of the so-called hippie movement that are somewhat tragic now. It's like a kernel, the instinctual depth of what we were trying to do has been usurped in a way. Just, it's like there's disinformation everywhere. The disinformation part of what's happening with people that are today called hippies and what they're doing. But really, how it's affected my life, really, I think is just my appreciation constantly for nature. And as I've gotten much older, I now have the time to actually be mind blown by a leaf, a bud, the piece of bark, just the little things that are just so phenomenal and beautiful, and so I feel like my experience really has just given me an incredible appreciation for life and nature, and my unbelievable family. I have an unbelievable family. Really, I have, 9 grandchildren, all are women except for one. 7 great-grandchildren. And every one of them they're all unique and fantastic and doing well. Yeah. Wouldn't you say?
I think so.
I think so, yeah. It's a remarkable family. Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Laura?
So it was about, can you remind me of the question again?
So how do you think living on a commune, being part of the counterculture movement has affected your life?
Right. Well, what I was referring to earlier around the capable thing. I mean, now my husband tells me, just because you can doesn't mean you have to. Somebody else can do that, you know? Because I find myself, you know, because I feel, and I'm so thankful that I can figure stuff out, and I really attribute that to all that school of capable that I was at when I was younger, in wherever I was, and in going back to what Mom was just talking about, I get an incredible amount of joy going out to 2 of my daughters' place in Crestova, and I see them living in a way that is very much like my mother's dream.
Yeah.
And you know, my eldest daughter Julia and her partner bought this piece of land in Crestova, and he built an earth ship. He went to New Mexico and did the training, you know, I think 6 weeks, and then when they bought the land, they bought it there because of the great exposure there at the sun, and he had this in mind. He wanted to build a self-sufficient house, and with his own hands, just like pounding the dirt, you know, to made the whole foundation himself. And he adapted the design a bit for this climate here, and built this beautiful earth ship. But they didn't quite get it finished, and then they were living in the house that they gutted and fixed up when they bought the property.
Little bungalow.
A little tiny bungalow, and then, but they, you know, kind of got a little short on money, and then all of a sudden the 2 sisters are like, and the guys are like, hey, why don't we give you some money and we'll buy the house from you, and you can finish the earth ship, and we can all be here together. And I call it the family compound, because I go there and I see them all living so harmoniously together.
Yeah.
And Julia and Carlos, the ones that built the earth ship, have 1 daughter, you know, and I always, I wish she had a sibling and hang out with, because, you know, I so value my sibling relationships. Like, I mean, you know, having brothers and sisters is great. So then comes along the other family, and they have a daughter, and so now all of a sudden she's got this whole relationship. The kids go back and forth from the houses. They all share in the garden. It's like the whole thing, like Mom said. You know, it's like, you know, they can have 1 wheelbarrow, they can have 1 snowblower, they can share it all, and the guys are out there building the fence together, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So I kind of, and like Mom was referring to the farmers in the valley, you see everyone doing it, and just kind of like going back to the land again.
Yeah, yeah.
It's back to the land, back to nature, back to being, you know, with each other. You know, I mean, what I witnessed over time is, you know, the biggest obstacle to communal living is human nature, is the humans. You know, trying to figure out how to get along and not wanna, it's like, how do you figure out that dynamic? It's not easy, I don't think.
No.
You know, and I think many communes tried, and many kind of dissolved. Some stayed together, but mostly kind of not, but maybe in the grander scheme of
Yeah.
the love circle, yes. In that way, the commune community, I feel like, is intact, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah. You must get a kick out of going out there too, hey? To Crestova and seeing the kids?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was there Easter Day. Laura was away at the time, but I went. Julia said we're going to have our Easter egg. The kids are going to have their Easter egg hunt that day, and my birthday was the day after. So we went out there, and the kids had the hunt, and there was other family there. Kids had their hunt, and there were all these appies on the table, and then birthday cake for the old girl, and yeah, I mean, and the young couple that bought the little bungalow, they now have 2 boys, a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old now. So
there's more kids there
there's
now.
more kids, and they all are getting along just wonderfully. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's a great thing to see.
It is, yeah. It's wonderful out there. And Carlos is still working on finishing touches on the house. Well, right now the focus is the fence because they have elk, but he wants to, you know, there's a solarium or like a greenhouse type thing on the built up on the front of the house. One wall of the house is one wall of the. What, about 8 feet across? 6
Something
feet,
like
6
that,
8
yeah.
feet, yeah. So there's growing. They can grow things there in the winter. He's wanting to have solar panels to, be independent there, and he has a water system which filters through. It goes from cleanest use to dirtiest use. Yeah, it's great to see.
Yeah.
The walls are 2 feet thick.
Made out of rammed earth.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he said he lost 40 pounds that summer.
Oh, did he?
Making that foundation.
So, Laura, did you want to read your piece?
I thought, as I'm working on, I could just pull out a couple of excerpts that seem a little bit
Pertinent?
yeah, pertinent, related. Here's a little bit. So this is out of my project that's called Lines, Tracing an Unconventional Story Through Poetry, Music, and Visual Art. And there's more here than I want to read right now, but I thought I'd read a bit. So here it says, going back to the land. Were we there before? Back to an earlier time? Back to a place? A utopian place to live. The magic of the daily ordinary things. Oh, my dear Slocan Valley, with all your beauty and bounty. The greenness and the greening, and so much abundance and nature. A nature playground, a kid's heaven on earth, away from the streets of Vancouver. We found fields, back roads, blue skies, and the magic and mystery of the river. A river from a lake, but not just any lake. The deep, deep water that cleans your soul and kisses your skin, takes you in and cares for you. The water keeps calling me back for another christening. And then I wrote this funny little bit where it says, the land and the community, to commune, to be in community, a commune, to commune, to be you and to be me, to be you, be me, be you, be me, not you, but not me, to be in a commune. I commune, you commune, we commune. We be community. Then I thought I would just read this little bit about because I make a reference to the Doukhobors. We learned new things, welcomed by the Doukhobors. I went to the school of capable. There was nurturing and confidence building in the human day-to-day things. Milking a cow, letting the cow know I was confident with my head pressed close. The feeling of confidence, self-assured in the milking. Fresh milk into butter, cheese and yogurt. Grinding wheat to make bread. Making jam, canning tomatoes, togetherness in making food, and creating a warm place to be. I had one other bit marked and I don't know what I did with it. I wanted to talk about the apples. Smells and sensations, memories of scent sitting in an apple tree, crunching on the sweetness in my mouth. 3 families and a 1-room cabin. 6 adults and 6 kids. Upstairs, 1 giant bed, or rather wall-to-wall beds, the geometry of a patchwork quilt. Babies coming out into this life. A wood stove, tin wash basin, a giant metal milk jug. Outhouse, frozen water, no electricity. Kerosene lamps and laughter, so much laughter. Children playing by the river that is always changing and always the same, always the spiritual. Going down to the river to get water, going down to the river to swim, going down to the river. Where's the next part of that? I don't know where it got to. Anyway, going down to the river to smash, 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 and wash, 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 and smash, smash, and wash, wash, smash the ice, and wash, wash, and feel clean, and feel the water, and Mother made me throw the I Ching. We'll end it like that.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. Okay, thank you, Laura. Right, do you have anything you wanted to add, or are we good?
Not really. I could add that my brother, who lived in South America, in Venezuela, for a good 40 years. He had family there, and now they're all north. He came to visit me and stayed with me when I was on High Street, and stayed with me for a month. And a couple of times he came in, he said, "Everybody here smiles at you. Everybody's so happy here." And so it got me thinking about Nelson and the Kootenays, and how the influence of the Doukhobors, the influence of the Back to the Landers, and the influence of the Draft Dodgers, and that it has affected the nature of people here in the Kootenays, and that there is a strong undercurrent of support and getting along, which I feel in Nelson. I wish everybody did. I think some don't, but I certainly feel that about Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the kids, when I go out with the kids, they're, well, especially Rivka, that's my youngest, she'd be like, "Oh, we can't go anywhere without you." And just everybody just, stops and takes forever to do anything. I guess I have to talk to everybody. But it feels so good when you go out in your community and you, and it's like, and yeah, it's true. It's like you go out and it's like, smile.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Yeah.
That's a lovely positive note to end, I think.
And I just wanted to thank you for having us and inviting us and for doing this project. It's wonderful.
It is.
I mean, I was kind of working on this other thing and it just like, anyway, before, but it's wonderful, you know, it gives so many more moments of reflection and appreciation
Yeah.
and remembering and all that, so thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to say I do have a newspaper photo of said cow. It's I don't have it with me now. It's actually me milking the cow. my head and my long hair, and I got my gumboots on. Is that would you like that photo? Oh, I mean, it's a brown old Vancouver Sun photo. But
Oh, is it from the Vancouver Sun?
I imagine so.
You don't think it's from a newspaper from around here?
I don't think so. I
I
mean,
think they came here to
they
do
came-
some
I
story.
know, it's peculiar actually how that happened in Lillooet too. There was a picture of me in the Vancouver Sun. It was a big full-page article on what we were doing.
Oh, I remember.
And I had my hand out with a garlic in it, and
Oh, right, go.
and the journalist referred to me as your typical Caresdale a housewife or something. There I
It's like, what?
What?
No, not at all.
So that burned in the house fire. I had a house fire. Yeah.
Yeah, we lost a lot.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah, we are still looking for photographs, artifacts.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about lanterns. I don't know anything that was from those times for display. We're going to the Dukkabor Museum to pick up some items that relate to that history and interviewing some Dukkabor people. And yeah.
Boy, I learned what a good hand tool is from the Dukkabors.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't make hoes the right way now. A Dukkabor hoe had a slight angle on it, and of course the metal was so good it would stay sharp. Yeah.
We're gonna have some spinning wheels and the various washboards, things like that, which is very much part of the domestic scene that would have been there, and
Washboards.
Mm-hmm.
I have a washboard.
Do you have a washboard from that time?
Plunger.
Does it relate from that time, or how old is this?
I don't have it.
Not now. She
No.
had one
Oh,
then.
she
yeah.
had one.
No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, I don't.
There's a lot of. Have you been out to Will's place yet?
Not yet, but we got going. there.
There's a lot of things out there, and there's actually a milk. You know how they had the big milk jugs? They were like the. And I don't know if it was the one that I remember we used to go to Koziansik's to get the milk.
To get our milk.
And there's it's like when you first pull in, he's got it with a work helmet on its head. And anyways, it's an old rusted, it's a milk thing. I don't know, there's things like that. There's lots, he's got all kinds of things out there. And one of those, the old ringer, or did you plug it in? Well, there was the kind you went like this to do the laundry, or you could plug it in and put it through.
Not there.
No, I know. We didn't have electricity, but
Right.
maybe it's this kind then. I don't know.
Right.
Okay. Well.
A mangle, that's called.
We okay? Sorry. Yes.